She was found face down on her bed, naked, clutching a telephone receiver in one hand, her body already cold, the room littered with empty pill bottles and the lingering scent of tragedy. The date was August 5, 1962, and in a modest Spanish-style bungalow at 12305, 5th Helena Drive in Brentwood, Los Angeles, the most dazzling star Hollywood had ever produced lay dead at just 36 years old, her life extinguished in the cruelest possible irony. A woman who had brought so much light to the world had perished alone in the darkness. Her name was Marilyn Monroe, but the world would come to know her by many names: the blonde bombshell, the goddess of love, the ultimate sex symbol of the 20th century. Yet before she became the most famous face on the planet, she was simply Norma Jean, a frightened little girl who never knew her father and whose mother was too ill to love her. She was born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926, at Los Angeles County Hospital in California, though she would later be baptized as Norma Jean Baker, taking the surname of her mother's first husband. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, was a film cutter at Consolidated Film Industries, a woman of Mexican birth who had migrated from a poor Midwestern family to California at the turn of the century. Her father was absent from the very beginning, his identity long speculated upon until DNA evidence in 2022 appeared to confirm he was Charles Stanley Gifford, Gladys's supervisor at a film editing company. Gladys, suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, was institutionally incapable of providing the love and stability a child needs. Little Norma Jean would later recall one of her earliest and most haunting memories: her mother trying to smother her in her crib with a pillow. The neighborhood where she spent her earliest years was the working-class fringes of Los Angeles, a city already drunk on the intoxicating dream of Hollywood, yet for Norma Jean, that dream remained a distant, unreachable star. Her childhood was a revolving door of foster homes, 12 in total, and a stint in an orphanage. In 1937, a family friend named Grace Goddard and her husband took her in for a few years, paid $25 a week by Gladys to raise the child, but they were strict fundamentalists who forbade her from even going to the movies. When Doc Goddard's job transferred to the East Coast, they could not afford to take her, and at just 7 years old, Norma Jean was cast back into the brutal uncertainty of foster care. It was in those years that she endured the unthinkable, sexual assault on multiple occasions, and she later confessed that she had been raped when she was only 11 years old. School offered no refuge from her suffering. She attended various schools across Los Angeles, including Van Nuys High School, but she was a poor student, frequently absent, her mind clouded by the chaos of her home life. She dropped out entirely by the age of 15, her formal education abandoned in favor of survival. Yet even in those desperate years, there were glimmers of the star she would become. She was strikingly beautiful, with an ethereal quality that made people stop and stare. She dreamed of becoming an actress like Jean Harlow or Lana Turner, but those dreams seemed impossibly out of reach for a girl whose only escape from the orphanage was marriage. And so, at 16, she married James Dougherty, a 21-year-old police officer and childhood acquaintance, on June 19, 1942. The marriage saved her from being sent back to an orphanage, but it also trapped her in a life of domesticity she never wanted. She became a housewife, dropping out of school entirely, while Dougherty joined the Merchant Marine and was sent to the South Pacific during World War II. It was during the war, while working in a munitions factory in Van Nuys, California, that fate finally intervened. A photographer from the 1st Motion Picture Unit of the U.S. Army Air Forces discovered her on the assembly line, her beauty so startling amid the grime of factory work that he immediately began taking her picture. Those photographs launched her into the world of pin-up modeling, and by the time Dougherty returned from the war in 1946, Norma Jean was no longer the meek housewife he had left behind. She had a burgeoning career, and she had made a decision that would change everything. She dyed her hair platinum blonde, adopted the stage name Marilyn Monroe, and signed her first film contract with 20th Century Fox. The marriage to Dougherty, already strained by her transformation, ended in divorce in 1946. He later confessed that he had been in love with Norma Jean, but Marilyn Monroe was a stranger he simply did not recognize. The early years of her acting career were marked by frustration and struggle. She was not taken seriously by studio executives who saw her only as a pretty face, a piece of decorative flesh to be exploited. She was typecast in minor roles, often playing the dumb blonde, a stereotype she would come to despise. But in 1950, everything began to change. She landed minor but critically acclaimed roles in 2 landmark films, The Asphalt Jungle and All About Eve. These performances proved that beneath the bombshell exterior lay a genuinely gifted actress, and Hollywood took notice. The turning point, however, came in 1953, the year that would define her legacy. She starred in the film noir Niagara, a movie that overtly relied on her sex appeal and made her a household name. Then came the comedies that would cement her stardom. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, in which she performed the now immortal Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, and How to Marry a Millionaire. In that single year, Marilyn Monroe became the most marketable Hollywood star on the planet, a phenomenon the likes of which the industry had never seen. Her peak was a whirlwind of iconic moments that burned themselves into the collective consciousness of the world. In 1954, she filmed The 7-Year Itch, and during production, she stood over a subway grate in New York City, her white dress billowing up around her thighs in a gust of wind. That single image became one of the most famous photographs in cinematic history, a symbol of carefree sexuality that defined an era. In 1955, she formed her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, a bold move that gave her unprecedented creative control and made her one of the first actresses to challenge the studio system. In 1959, she delivered what many consider her finest performance in Billy Wilder's Some Like It Hot, a comedy masterpiece in which she played the ukulele-strumming sugarcane Kowalczyk. The film earned her a Golden Globe for Best Actress, proving once and for all that she was not merely a sex symbol but a comic genius of the highest order. Her films had grossed an astonishing $200 million by the time of her death, equivalent to over $2 billion today. She was ranked as the 6th greatest female screen legend by the American Film Institute. She had won the Henrietta Award for Best Young Box Office Personality and the World Film Favorite Award. She was, by any measure, one of the most successful and beloved entertainers in human history. Yet behind the glittering facade, Marilyn Monroe's personal life was a landscape of heartbreak and disappointment. She was married 3 times, each union ending in failure. Her first marriage to James Dougherty had ended in divorce. Her second was to Joe DiMaggio, the legendary New York Yankees baseball player, a man she connected with in 1952 and married in 1954 at San Francisco City Hall, shocking the world by wearing a black suit instead of a traditional white wedding dress. But their marriage was tempestuous and short-lived, less than 9 months. The iconic subway grate scene from The 7-Year Itch infuriated DiMaggio, and their subsequent fight snowballed into a host of other problems that led to divorce in 1955. Her third and final marriage was to Arthur Miller, the Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright of Death of a Salesman. They wed in 1956, and for a time, it seemed she had finally found intellectual and emotional companionship. But Miller's aloofness and her own insecurities doomed the marriage, and they divorced in 1961. She had no children, despite desperately wanting them, and her half-sister, Bernice Baker Miracle, remained a distant figure she met only a handful of times. She was plagued by rumors of affairs with powerful men, including President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, rumors that have never been definitively confirmed but which added to the mythology of her tragic life. At the height of her fame, Marilyn Monroe lived a life of contradictions. She owned a beautiful Spanish-style hacienda at 12305 Fifth Helena Drive in Brentwood, Los Angeles, the home where she would ultimately die. She also maintained an apartment in New York City, a penthouse that reflected her sophistication and her desire to escape the suffocating confines of Hollywood. Her net worth at the time of her death was estimated at approximately $800,000, equivalent to roughly $8.5 million today. But she earned far less than her male counterparts. She was paid only $100,000 for Some Like It Hot while Tony Curtis earned $250,000, and for The Misfits, she earned $100,000 while Clark Gable took home $500,000. She drove a 1956 Ford Thunderbird, a symbol of her glamour. She spent lavishly on clothes, jewelry, and her homes, but her spending often exceeded her income, leaving her with a surprisingly modest estate. In her free time, she read voraciously. She was far more intelligent than the dumb blonde persona she was forced to play, and she studied acting with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, desperate to be taken seriously as an artist. But the darkness that had haunted her since childhood never truly released its grip. Marilyn Monroe struggled with severe depression, chronic insomnia, and a devastating addiction to pills and alcohol. She was diagnosed with a range of psychiatric conditions, including borderline personality disorder and manic depressive illness. She was frequently hospitalized, and her behavior on film sets became increasingly erratic. She suffered from deep insecurities, a crushing sense of emptiness, and a desperate need for approval that could never be satisfied. Her mental health battles were exacerbated by the pressures of fame, the relentless scrutiny of the media, and the exploitation she endured at the hands of the very industry that had made her a star. She once said, "I don't want to be a sex symbol. I want to be an actress." But the world refused to see her as anything other than a body, a commodity, a fantasy. The final chapter of her life unfolded with the grim inevitability of a Greek tragedy. In the months before her death, she was working on an unfinished film called Something's Got to Give, a comedy that was plagued by her chronic lateness, her illness, and her inability to perform. Her last full day of filming was June 1st, 1962, her 36th birthday. After that, she was frequently absent, and the studio suspended her. Publicly, she appeared increasingly fragile and desperate, her radiant smile masking a soul in agony. Privately, she was consumed by her addictions and her fears. She was deeply in debt, her career in jeopardy, and her personal life in shambles. In the weeks before her death, she was reportedly despondent, telling friends she felt like she was falling apart. She had been prescribed Nembutal and other barbiturates to treat her insomnia and depression, and she had become dangerously dependent on them. On the night of August 4th, 1962, she was alone in her Brentwood home, the housekeeper, Eunice Murray, staying in a guest room. What happened in those final hours remained shrouded in mystery and controversy. Sometime in the early morning hours of August 5th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe died in her bed, face down, a telephone receiver in her hand, as if she had been trying to call for help in her final moments. The cause of death was ruled a probable suicide by acute barbiturate poisoning. Empty bottles of sleeping pills were found scattered around her room. Her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, who had been called to the scene, informed the funeral director that her death was from an overdose of Nembutal and that it was suicide. But questions have lingered for decades. Was it truly suicide, or was it an accidental overdose? Or was there something more sinister at play? A conspiracy involving the Kennedy brothers, the CIA, or the mob? The speculation has never been resolved, and perhaps it never will be. What is certain is that the world lost one of its brightest stars on that terrible night. The news of her death sent shockwaves around the globe. Fans gathered in mourning outside her home, weeping and leaving flowers. The media descended upon Brentwood, turning the quiet street into a circus of grief and sensationalism. In the aftermath of her death, Joe DiMaggio, despite their divorce, claimed her body and arranged a private funeral, refusing to allow Hollywood's elite to exploit her even in death. The service was held at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles, attended by just 25 mourners, including Lee Strasberg, who delivered a heart-wrenching eulogy. She was laid to rest in a pink silk dress in a crypt at the same cemetery, where she remains to this day, surrounded by the other Hollywood legends who have since joined her in eternity. The tributes that poured in from around the world were overwhelming, a testament to the profound impact she had on millions of lives. But for all the public mourning, the tragedy of Marilyn Monroe was deeply personal. A woman who had spent her entire life searching for love and acceptance, only to die utterly alone. Her legacy, however, is immortal. Marilyn Monroe changed the course of cinema and popular culture forever. She shattered the boundaries of what a female star could be, challenging the studio system and fighting for creative control at a time when women were treated as property. She became a symbol of the sexual revolution, an emblem of freedom and desire that transcended generations. But more than that, she became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the cruelty of fame, the devastation of mental illness, and the profound loneliness that can exist behind even the most radiant smile. Today, her image is more famous than ever, her face adorning everything from t-shirts to fine art, her films still beloved by audiences around the world. She is remembered not just as a sex symbol, but as a human being, flawed, fragile, and desperately, heartbreakingly real. So we ask ourselves, what would Marilyn Monroe have become if she had lived? What masterpieces might she have created? What battles might she have won? What peace might she have finally found? We will never know. All we have is the haunting image of a woman who burned brighter than anyone else, only to be consumed by her own fire. She was, in the end, a tragic paradox, the most desired woman in the world, yet unable to love herself, the most famous face on the planet, yet invisible to those who should have protected her, a goddess to the world, but a lost little girl to herself. Her story is not just a story of Hollywood glamour, but a story of what happens when dreams become nightmares, when beauty becomes a curse, and when the light that illuminates the world ultimately destroys the one who carries it. Marilyn Monroe died on that August night, but she will never truly be gone. She lives on in every frame of film, in every whispered memory, in every heart that has ever been touched by her magic. And perhaps, in some small way, that is the redemption she was always seeking, the love she never found in life, given freely and eternally by a world that will never forget her. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the fragility of life and the enduring power of art, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Before Die, the channel that brings you the untold stories of the legends we lost too soon. Leave a comment below. What is your favorite Marilyn Monroe memory? What film made you fall in love with her? And don't forget to hit that notification bell, because we have many more stories of Hollywood's brightest stars and their darkest hours waiting to be told. Thank you for watching, and remember, before they were legends, they were human.